Just let it run. Don't even worry about it. It's nothing to move. Matter of fact, I would have loved that to know how to this. I wish I put this on the other side.
You want yours up too?
It's locked in. It's okay, right? Yes, we got it. Thank you, man. That's a Thank you, man.
Ready with the computer wait. I put it right here.
Really good for
I didn't know that boy was on my team, that's why. Oh, no, thank you.
your parents been contacted? They're all good? No. Go team! Okay, that's good. So now we just need to connect them to the educational advocates, okay? So we'll work on that in the next week. Okay. Yes, sir. Okay.
I always do that.
Don't say no bad
I'm gonna block that ball.
All right. See you at that runoff.
Dude is crazy.
Oh, you mean the little holes?
On Sunday. Monday. Oh, I bet it was what's his name? The gentleman that no, not on Monday. That's when they made an announcement after
Beautiful.
Right, but after that, you know, they have Wayne comes on and does
We're going to be starting in about 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, we're going to get started.
He was fine. So when he was on vacation, he was good. We don't have to have a business. But then he realized that was and then they had books on sale. There's a lot of stuff in the Here we are, man, our favorite.
Like this shirt, this one did I said this. But that's how I didn't really do it. That's how I didn't really do it. They get too low. Ooh.
We actually have
Right.
our Indian
Like what's that boy name?
What's up, man?
If I can get everybody on the outside, if I can get everybody on the outside in. My clock says 6:30. My clock says 6:30. How you doing? And we're gonna start at 6:30 because I set aside 6:30 to 8:30. And for those of you who know, who are familiar with how we run it at the Caucus, we're gonna start at 6:30 and we're gonna end at 8:30. Okay? So that's just the way we're gonna operate. No CP time on this end. I am Sylvester Turner. I chair the Legislative Black Caucus. And I certainly want to welcome all of you who are here. We're very grateful that each one of you are taking out the time to be here. What we think will be an informative evening. I will tell you that this idea originated with the Dean of the Texas House, and that's Representative Sophronia Thompson. During the latter part of the regular legislative session, she thought it would be good for us to have a collective town hall meeting. Many times we have them in our own individual districts, but then there are African Americans that are not in our districts, that are outside of our districts. And so we thought it would be good to have a collective town hall meeting between Harris and Fort Bend County. And we just thought it would be no better place to have it than right here at Texas Southern, which is right in the heart of all of the Houston and Fort Bend area. So let me thank you all for being present. Let me also say to you that while we are having this town hall meeting at Texas Southern in Houston, the African American legislators and state senator in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, they're having the same town hall meeting in Dallas, just like we're having here, a collective town hall meeting where the folk from Dallas and Fort Worth, African Americans, are coming together with the same sort of agenda, and their hours too will be from 6:30 to 8:30. We initially were going to try to simulcast a little bit from both, but we'll do that next time around. And so we want to cover. There are going to be several areas that we're going to cover. First, the legislative caucus members from this area will make some brief comments, about 5 minutes each, and I've asked them to kind of cover one issue that they want to address. And then we'll do that. Then I want to thank those who have partnered with us for tonight, whether it's KeyPack, and I'm going to start to call it KeyPack, KCOH, Magic 102, 92 FM, 97.9 The Box, the Houston Sun, the Forward Times. We'll have them ask some questions to the members. And then there are some resource people here as well. And then we want to have a lot of time for the members, for questions from the audience and comments from the audience as well. And so I think we'll move progressively along. We have some resources people here to cover some areas. I know Charles Savage from the 5th Ward Enrichment Center is here, which has been a community-based organization on the 5th Ward side of town. Gary Thornton is here from Noble, former FBI agent in public law enforcement. with Noble, that organization. And then we have, I always get to Natasha's last name. I'm going to get it. Natasha, give me the last name. Pronounce it for me one more time. Kaganta. Natasha is out of New York, who flew in tonight for this meeting. She's on the legal defense fund of the NAACP and was one of the attorneys handling cases before the Supreme Court dealing with redistricting and voting rights and all of that. And so she's here and will be answering questions as it relates to the Voting Rights Act and redistricting, voter ID, and all of that. And so we're glad to have all of them here tonight. We want to cover several areas. One is the legislative session was just, well, it's still going on because we are in our second special session called by the governor. So all of us will be leaving, heading back because we will resume tomorrow. So the legislative session, the issues that took place there. We want to talk about the Voting Rights Act. The Supreme Court struck down part of Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act, so we want to deal with that issue as well and the impact on us and what we need to do as we move forward. And then we want to talk also about the aftermath of the Trayvon Martin decision. Not so much to relitigate that, but the critical question is, where do we go from here? And let me just say, on all of these issues, whether one chooses to accept it or not, it does come down to who you put in office and how to get there. So all of it comes back to that. But before I go any further, I want to thank Texas Southern University for opening their doors. Give a hand. Texas Southern University. I want to thank Texas Southern University for opening their doors to us, for making themselves available. Laurent Snowden has been our point person here, but the chairman of the board is here with us tonight. Where did he go? Oh, Glenn. Tell Glenn it's time for him to come on the inside. Glenn Lewis. I want to give him an opportunity to come up and provide some opening remarks before we get down to business. Let me thank while he comes in. Let me also thank all the black elected officials who are here. Glenn, why don't you come up? Let me have Glenn Lewis, the chairman of the board of Texas Southern University Board of Regents, to come up and give some more feedback. Glenn Lewis, and a former colleague of ours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I won't be here long. I didn't anticipate speaking, but Mr. Chairman asked me to bring greetings, and you do what the chairman asks you to do. That's what you do. My name is Glenn Lewis. It is my honor and privilege to have served as chairman of the Board of Regents here at Texas Southern University since April of 2007. As chairman, I'd like to welcome all of you to the Texas Southern University campus, especially my former colleagues and my friends in the legislature. We're glad to have you here. I think this is an important thing to have this conversation and this dialogue, and Texas Southern University is extremely proud to host and be part of that. That's part of what universities ought to be doing. It's education. Thank you very much.
Chairman, we certainly appreciate all of that. Before I introduce the caucus members themselves, I know that there are other elected officials that are here. So for all other elected officials who are here, and as well, let me include elected, now, and former elected officials. If you'll just stand so we can all see you. All former elected officials or elected officials except for your own right. And if you will, while you stand, why don't you take the time and introduce yourself? Larry, why don't we start? Councilmember, why don't we start with you? Because I do want people to know who's here.
Larry Green, Houston City Council, District K.
John. Former city council member and Mayor Pro Tem. Okay.
Erica Lee, Harris County School Board Trustee.
Good. And there will be some others coming in. I want you to. Oh, I'm sorry, Bruce.
Bruce Ross, Houston Community College.
Carol Robinson, Houston Community College trustee, former Houston City Council member, and you're in District 4 of HCC. Welcome.
And just got elected.
Just got elected.
Congratulations to you. Any others? and there will be others coming. The reason why I say that is a part of this town hall meeting, I think it's important for us to recognize those who are holding elected officials in Harris and Fort Bend County. So get a chance to get to know them, and I think it's critically important. Let me introduce now the members of the Legislative Black Caucus from the Houston, Harris County, and Fort Bend area. I'm just gonna start on the end, and then I'll come over. The Dean of the Texas House of Representatives is none other than State Representative Sophronia Thompson. 50% of the blacks in the state Senate happen to be here. There are two of them, and one of them is here tonight, and that's none other than Senator Rodney Ellis. Out of Fifth Ward, Texas, Representative Harold Dutton. On the sunny side, Representative Boris Miles. Ben is Representative Ron Reynolds. Representative Emma Allen is on her way. It is called, she had a flat tire, and so she will be on her way very soon. And then Representative Gardner Coleman, he and I talked, he is not feeling well tonight, so he will not be here, so we will be covering for him as well. Now what we're going to do, and I want to start right now, and that is a number of issues that we tackle with in the legislative session. This portion is just a brief overview, okay? A brief overview of what we did. We're going to do this fairly quickly, and then we're going to have members of the black press to ask questions to the members, and then we'll move from there. So this is a very brief overview. I've asked each one to try to take one major issue, to highlight it, just for your edification, and then we'll move from there. The first person that I'm going to call up is Senator Rodney Ellis, also from Sunnyside too, Oregon High School, in the state Senate, been in the state Senate for a number of years, and is an effective advocate on your behalf. Let me call up Senator Rodney Ellis.
Thank you, Chairman Turner. And Sylvester, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. I talked to our colleague in Dallas, Helen Giddings, and she and Royce West and other African-American legislators in North Texas are having a town hall meeting at the same time that we're having this one here. So the Texas Legislative Black Caucus is heard in Central Texas, as well as here in Houston, as well as in North Texas. So Sylvester, give you a round of applause for you really gave me three issues, and I'm going to do them in 5 minutes. You told me I'd come first. I was going to go to Dallas tonight, but I'm too old to leave here and go to Dallas, and then hop on a plane and get to Austin tomorrow, so I'm not going to run out tonight. First, I want to thank the folks from TSU for bringing us here. Your staff asked me to give a quick update. TSU's budget is $156 million, $156,017,121 for the next 2-year cycle, Mr. Chairman. That is not enough, but it is an overall increase of $6 million for the 2012-2013 budget and $4 million over the 2010-2011 budget. Because of historic underfunding issues at Texas Southern University, we made tremendous strides back in 2000. And we made those strides because people in this room marched, if you're old enough to remember that, from Texas Southern to the University of Houston. It was not a march because anybody was against the University of Houston, but to make the point that there are still historical vestiges of discrimination in higher education in Texas. As a result of that, in the Clinton administration, we signed an agreement with the federal government that led to something called Office of Civil Rights Funding. And for about 10 of those 13 years, we were rolling pretty good, Mr. Chairman. We'd get that extra money almost automatically. We had to fight this last go-around and do as much as we could to get there. We made progress, but still not enough. The Texas Grants Program is the biggest student financial aid program for anybody who gets a scholarship in Texas. We budgeted $724 million for that program in this upcoming budget. And that will fund about 84% of the students that are eligible to get a scholarship to go to college, including the ones who go here at TSU. Statewide, it's about 145,000 students. Here's the bad news. Although we put more money in, the universities now have the latitude to give you less than a scholarship that pays for tuition and fees, which would run about $8 grand per student. Now they have the option of giving you $5,000 instead. But it is the school's decision, Mr. Chairman, on whether or not you think you ought to invest more in a few students, or if you ought to spread it out across the board to a lot of students and get the $5,000. That's the decision you all will have to make. Tuition at TSU has gone up 206% since the legislature deregulated tuition. That means now the Board of Regents set the tuition instead of the state setting it. I think, I'm not sure, I think all of us who are here tonight, who were in the legislature when that decision was made in 2003, voted against that. But it's a difficult challenge for students to go to college now, unlike what it cost when I went to Texas Southern University. And it makes it very difficult for these young people to go to college when you end up with more college debt than the debt for a house. The failure to expand Medicaid is what you want me to talk about. Here's the short of it. Medicaid expansion is Obamacare. The state of Texas didn't do it. And in succinct terms, it's the stupidest thing you could ever think of. For a mere investment of $50 million in our money, we call it general revenue, for $50 million in our money, we would have drawn down $4 billion in federal money, in Obamacare money, for the 1.5 million people in Texas. 1.1 million adults don't have health insurance, and 400,000 children. Now, we pay for it anyway. You pay for it at the emergency room. You know, doctors took this thing called the Hippocratic Oath. It means that if you are ill, they have a duty to serve you. Unlike lawyers, who would be hypocrites. You don't have the money to pay for your lawyer, you won't get any legal help. Several of us here co-sponsored bills to give our colleagues several times to vote to let you decide. Just take it to the voters and let the voters decide if you think it's nuts to turn down that money from the federal government. Over the life of Obamacare, the state of Texas over 10 years would have to put up $15 billion in your money, in general revenue. $15 billion sounds like a lot of money, right? To draw down $100 billion for health care. Most of the state's budget, state's budget spent in two areas. It's spent on either health care or education. So the only way we're going to draw down that Medicaid money in Obamacare is for you to take some people out of office and put some new people in. The last subject that you asked me to talk about, I'm sticking to it. You told me I'm going to do the five. The last subject you asked me to talk about was criminal justice system. I know Representative Reynolds is going to talk a little bit about stand your ground and the Castle Doctrine in Texas. Statute here is not as bad as it is in Florida, but it is bad. One of the lessons out of the Trayvon Martin tragedy is that there were all sorts of errors through the process. In Texas, as is the case in most places around the country, African American males are nearly 12 times as likely to be in prison for a drug conviction as an adult white male, even though they use drugs at the very same exact rate. 10 times, African American males are 10 times more likely to end up on death row. With the stand your ground laws around the country, I don't know the stats for Texas, but when the shooter is white and the victim is black, the justifiable homicide rate is 34%. When the situation is reversed and the shooter is black and the victim is white, shootings are ruled to be justifiable homicide in slightly more than 3% of the cases. One of our successes during this past session of the legislature was something called the Michael Martin Act. There was a guy in a little town outside Austin, Texas, who was convicted of killing his wife. He spent 25 years in prison. He was the wrong guy. And the Innocence Project out of New York got the guy out of jail after 25 years. Now, he ended up being a poster child for us to pass this Michael Martin Act. Let me tell you what it means. Texas is the only state that didn't have a discovery statute. Discovery statute means that if the prosecutor knows something that would get you off, they got a duty to give it up. Well, we passed that statute because it was called the Michael Martin Act. I hope when we go back that there are lessons that we learn about disparate impact, about the system being unfair, and maybe we'll end up passing Trayvon Martin Act, even in Texas, but you better give us some new legislators to do that. Thanks.
Let me thank Senator Ellis, and you see me standing. The only reason I'm standing is that there's a lot that we need to cover tonight, okay? And I want us to cover it as much as possible. I want the questions to come, and I want you to be a part of this town hall discussion. But we want to put some thoughts out. I hope you're keeping some notes. You've got some questions. Then we're going to come right back. We intend to be here until 8:30. Let me also now recognize this, Don Smith out of the Fort Bend, Missouri area. Don, stand up so people can see you on City Council. There. Rhonda Skillum Jones, the Board of Trustee of HISD. Where's Trustee Jones? Right there. Stand up, Rhonda, so we can see you. Councilmember Jerry Davis, District B, City of Houston. Thank you, Councilmember. And then there's on the board, John Ogletree, and I want to say that's Cy-Fair. As you can see, there are the brothers and sisters all over this county. And then there's Ron Green, over the money, Ron Green, the comptroller. Good to see you there. Okay. Now at this time, let me call on Representative Boris Miles, who's going to be covering the voter ID elections and redistricting. We're going to see if we can do it in 5 minutes.
I will try, my chairman. Let me first thank TSU for also hosting us here and the leadership of my chairman, Sylvester Turner, and thank you for allowing me to be your voice, particularly in District 146. This past session, I had the honor of serving as Vice Chair of Elections. From the beginning of this session, I realized our primary goal was to play defense to prevent the calculated assault on the Minority Voting Rights Act that has been going on since 2005. I am pleased to report to you today that no legislation damaging as the voter ID bill that was passed in 2011 was passed this session. Let me repeat that. No legislation as damaging as the 2011 voter ID passed. The voter ID bill was passed this particular session. The worst bill for minority voters that moved through the process is HB 148. Initially, the bill was created for state jail felonies for people who were, if you presented more than 2 mail ballots. I want y'all to think about that because I see a lot of people in here that work campaigns. They were trying to put a state jail felony on anybody who presented more than 2 mail ballots. Those include people who are just helping the elderly, college students who were going out to register people who were voting, and who made it really bad for our community. We brought the fight, in fact, was going to be criminalized a lot of good Samaritans in an attempt to go after paid voting harvesters. Through democratic efforts, the final bill completely eliminated the limits of Good Samaritans voting collection. The final version of the bill passed only criminalizing the paid voter harvesting problem. So if any of y'all out there, and you know who you are, that get paid to harvest votes, I will warn you now. The law will go into effect in January, and it will be now a state jail felony if you are caught doing such an act. As many of you know, the group called The True Vote emerged from the King Street Patriots, and I want to thank the brothers in here that helped me to combat District 146 when we had to fight the King Street Patriots at the polling places. But many of those people, they emerged as out of the Tea Party movement. The True to Vote front group, as they sent the Capitol to push Tea Party agenda and restrict minority participation in the election process. I can tell you that only one bill the True Vote testified in, every bill that the True Vote testified in, the election committee, none of them passed. The legislation, if we opposed by myself and Texas Democrats such as Eric Johnson and Hubert Vogt were part of that committee. The Tea Party and King Street Patriot election bill were stopped in its dead tracks. Never got out of committee. There were also bills that were trying to be pushed through the process that would have hurt us. Some of the bills were to eliminate straight ticket voting process. That was HB 2060. A bill to cut early voting period was stopped. A bill that would identify poll watchers to make them a crime to disclose poll watchers identified with their permission. We had another attempt to allow poll watchers to be videotaped the polling places. Can you imagine that? So we were going to be videotaped as we go to our polls. That bill was stopped. The bill to allow the striking of voters from registrations, lists based on information provided by other states without a safeguard for any accuracy. Some of y'all may or may not know that there are people who actually live in mobile homes that register in one city and go across the line to register in another city. They actually do that. That's part of the Tea Party and the King Street's Patriots, and we eliminated some of those things. The good bills that passed this cycle. The only election bill that passed this session were common sense reforms, a process that will not adversely affect minorities. Counties like Harris will no longer be allowed to purge voters because of weak matching with the Secretary of State's purging list. Okay? The Secretary of State will now require to put the voting purge list on their website so that voters can easily check their status online if they suspect they have been purged. That bill passed. That was 2465. The Harris County bill, I forgot to tell you, I co-authored that bill. The poll watchers will now be required to wear badges to identify themselves as poll watchers. We've had that problem in the past. Legislation passed to make it easier to oversee military voters to vote by mail was authored by my colleague and the Dean of the House, Mr. Barney Thompson. For seniors and disabled voters, once they apply for a mail ballot, they will be sent a mail ballot for all elections for that calendar year, so they will not have to keep going back and filing for mail. I join all the counties as well. In conclusion, it will be, we were very diligent during the interim. We will be very diligent during the interim to keep protecting minority rights. The election committee will be studying the voting issues in advance of 2015. And I would ask you, if there are any particular issues that you believe need addressing, if you have any potential legislation you want to change in the laws of Texas as it relates to voting, I welcome you to contact my office, and I'm here for you. Now, real quickly, Mr. Chairman, you asked me to also speak on 2 issues. You can't stand up here, brother. I got you gave me 2 options. Redistricting. Let me just talk real briefly on redistricting. As you know, we did go back for redistricting this session. We had a special session to address redistricting. In a nutshell, the lines that we voted on this last session were the ones that are trying to be voted in as current lines. The state of Texas is still in the fight in San Antonio and in Washington, D.C. on redistricting. In a nutshell, we will still largely be running under the same maps in 2012, but everything could change depending on when and how the courts rule in the pending cases. And I will echo, we need this next voting cycle to get out and vote like there's no tomorrow. I thank you.
I want to thank Representative Miles. And let me just say, when you hear a lot of discussion about stand your ground and the castle doctrine, please bear in mind that those laws were voted in by people. And those people got in based on people that voted for them or based on folk who did not vote at all. And so all of this is integrated. It all fits in. Now let me ask you to tighten up just a little bit because there are many other people that's in the overflow room that would like to be in this room. So if there are some empty chairs close to you, if you're just kind of, as they say in church, if you're kind of just, you know, get together a little bit, that'll help out. Let me also, before I bring up the dean, let me acknowledge Dean Robert Bullock of the Barbara Jordan Nicolletan School of Public Affairs, where we are. Where's Dean Bullock? That's a Dean. This guy is known all over the country for the work that he's doing right here at Texas Southern. Thank you, Dean. Appreciate you. At this time, you know, we've heard a lot in this regular session and the special dealing with the assault on women and a number of other issues. There could be no greater advocate and fighter for those issues than the person that I'm about to introduce, and the person whose idea it is for us to be here tonight in a collective fashion town hall meeting, and that's none other than the Dean of the Texas House, Sophronia Thompson. Give it up for Sophronia Thompson.
Thank you very much. I want to talk to you first about equal pay for equal work, particularly for women. I carried a bill for equal pay and was passed by the House, and I had to go and help to get it passed in the Senate. And Senator Ellis was so gracious to help me get it done over there, but it was a lot of hard work. And this bill grew out of Prairie View A&M University hired a woman to fill a professorship and paid her less money than the man who had just left the job. So she filed a lawsuit, and after filing this lawsuit, she decided she wanted to go in the state court. She went in the state court and missed the deadline by 1 day because she thought that our laws were harmonized with the federal laws, which we normally do. I filed this bill, got it passed, House and Senate. Guess what? That's right. Governor vetoed it. But it does not mean that women doesn't deserve equal pay for equal work. At the end of the day, when a woman retires, how many years has she been cheated out of money that won't be a part of that retirement? And when there is a difference in the needs that she may need, who picks that tab up? The public. I was gracious enough to have so many wonderful people to work with. During this last session, I was able to carry a bill that dealt with ad litem, attorney ad litem, and being able to retain records of kids, because sometimes kids go in and out of foster homes, and usually the records are just kind of destroyed. But if we are able to keep those records, it makes it much easier for that person who gets that particular child to be able to keep them. I also carried a bill that dealt with divorced couples. Sometimes persons make a little more money, and they want, when they divorce, they want their spouse to have more than what the law may allow. And we wanted to make sure that those agreements could be enforced by law. So this bill, House Bill 389, would allow courts, if the husband decides, I don't want to pay my wife $1,000 child support, I want to pay her $6,000. And then down the road, a year or two later, decides, hey, I don't have to pay her but $1,000. Why am I paying this $6,000? She can go in court now and force the $6,000 if he's still able to pay the $6,000, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind that.
Do we all vote? Do we vote on that?
One of the bills I was greatly disappointed was gestation agreements. Let me tell you simply what that means. You hire a surrogate to have a child for you, and then you have to go to court to make sure that the parental rights of that surrogate are erased. And all my bill was going to do is give that surrogate a 1099, and you wouldn't have to go to court for that one layer of legal fees and time. When the baby is born, it's your baby. You done paid for it. You done paid her to have the baby. And for some reasons, you know, we have the group like the John Birch Society, the Eagle Forum, always somehow or another see gay in that issue, as if if heterogeneous people, you know, are the only people that have a pact on love. So I couldn't get too far with that bill, but I can tell you one thing. It took me a while to get the alimony done, but I got it done. And I'm going to be able to get it done. Let me just hasten to say that I was able to do 2 riders, thanks to my colleague, Representative Turner, who was on the probation committee. One rider is a rider that is going to allow us to open an office in Taiwan. And the purpose of opening an office in Taiwan is to allow Texas to sell beef for the first time in the history of Texas to Taiwan. They're going to buy our beef, which means that black farmers who sell beef are going to be able to sell their beef to Taiwan also. The second rider is going to give a $80 million to establish a high school and a sports center in North Forest community. Whether or not North Forest had remained an independent school district, or whether or not it went into HISD, that school district was going to be built, that high school was going to be built, and that sports facility was going to be built. And we're going to put an $80 million investment into that community.
And that money is coming from where?
It comes from the state of Texas, and it's not going to be anything that the people in North Forest is going to have to pay back. It's already their tax dollars, so we're giving them back $80 million of that money. I want to take this moment to say this. I want to thank my chairman who served on the committee. When we worked with the Commissioner of Education on this particular rider, there's a place in his budget that can fund this. But that particular fund had zero balance. And we were bumping up against a week and a half before the bill was going to come out, and we had to get that money in. So I pulled Senator Ellis, I pulled Sylvester, I pulled Senator Williams, Whitmire, Harold Dutton, and we sat down with all of the people in the Speaker's office, the Lieutenant Governor's office, all of the money folks, and we pulled together this $80 million. And then when we got it worked out, whoo, we better pull in the governor. So we got a meeting with the governor, and we sat down and got him on board. And once he got on board, which was very important because he could have line item vetoed this money, we made sure that he didn't line item veto it. We got that $80 million in it. So we know that we are on good footing. Also, I was able to pass a bill that would raise the level of funding for legal aid from $10 million to $50 million, so that persons who are unable to be able to afford to go to court, and particularly women who are victims of domestic violence and cannot afford a lawyer, go to civil court, would not be able to do that because those monies are going to be there and they'll be available for them. And before you get up, Mr. Chairman, let me just make this one last statement, and that's this. I passed some bills that dealt with prisons to make sure that when prisoners take courses, there are courses that they can come out and make a living on and not waste their time in a penitentiary on those. And before you get up, let me say this last one thing. I was PO'd. I know you said that, Reverend Jefferson. I'm not going to say the word. About several bills. One bill I got on the calendar, and this bill was going to knock out trace drugs in Harris County. We're the only county. That means that they find a baggie and they just barely got enough that they can scrape your tongue, or they can barely test it, and it's not enough for you to test to verify it. They can charge you with a crime. I wanted to eliminate that, and if you pick up one of my copies out there, you can see where Judge Max Patton, a Republican judge, asked me to carry this bill and supported it and asked them to eliminate it and to reduce the amount of drugs and cocaine less than a gram, to stop putting people in the penitentiary and charge them a fine for it, so we can stop building penitentiaries and keep closing them down. Thank you.
I want to thank Representative Thompson, and then we can come back to it when we're dealing with questions. At this time, let me call on Representative Ron Reynolds, who will be discussing some of the hub issues dealing with minority contracting, and then will provide a brief explanation on the Castle Drive doctrine versus the Stand Your Ground. Representative Reynolds out of Fort Bend, Missouri City.
Thank you, Chairman Turner. And let me say, it's great to be back home. I'm a proud product of Texas Southern University. So any Tigers in the house? I know, Senator, you're a product of Texas Southern, and we're very proud of this university and the great things that has been taking place under the leadership of Dr. Rudley. Also want to recognize two gentlemen that are in that room with us today. Ben Mendez, stand up, Ben, who is chair of the Texas Association of Mexican American Chambers of Commerce. Ben, thank you for being here. And also William Traylor, the chair of the Houston Black Chamber of Commerce, formerly known as the Houston Citizens Chamber of Commerce. William, will you be recognized? And the reason why I recognize those two gentlemen is because I'm here today to talk about the HUB program, the Historically Underutilized Business Program. How many of y'all know Texas has a HUB program? How many of y'all know Texas does a miserable job of making sure that there's a level playing field for minority businesses? Anybody in the house knows that? One of the things that I believe that representatives have a responsibility to do is sort of like that scripture found in Proverbs 31:8-9. And it says, speak out for the one who cannot speak, for the rights of those who are doomed. Speak out, judge fairly, and defend the rights of oppressed and needy people. Ladies and gentlemen, I can stand here today and tell you that the Texas Legislative Black Caucus has been fighting tooth and nail to make sure that African American small businesses that are competent, capable, and qualified have a level playing field to compete for contracts. These contracts are given with your state dollars. State dollars are the ones that fund these projects. There's billions and billions of dollars that never go into our community, that we never see, because there's no teeth behind the HUD program. I filed legislation, Representative Boris Miles has filed legislation, but guess what? We couldn't even get that bill on the floor. The reason why is because elections matter. We can't get any significant pieces of legislation that deal with civil rights, that deal with economic development for African Americans with the current legislation that we have right now. And I'm just speaking truthful, y'all. I'm not gonna give you no pie in the sky, no wish list. I'm telling you the way it is. Now, that's state law. I'm not talking about something that we want to change. We were trying to tweak it to put some teeth behind it. We did a disparity study. Not we, the state of Texas did a disparity study through the comptroller's office, because they have to do one every 10 years to make sure that Texas still has a need for the HUD program. And that disparity that was done by an independent company to look at all the state agencies to see their purchasing, whether or not they had, minority contractors for their goals. And every state agency failed, and failed miserably. In fact, TxDOT, the largest consumer of our public dollars, failed so bad that they got an F. As a result of that, me and Senator Royce West and members of the Legislative Black Caucus went to TxDOT and told them that if you continue these practices, we'll go to the Justice Department to ask them to do a federal review, because they get federal dollars as well. And I can tell you, because of our voice and speaking out, they've made some changes that are being rolled out right now, and we have a gentleman by the name of A.C. Phillips that's kind of doing a pilot to make sure that more minorities are participating. That wouldn't happen if you didn't have a Texas Legislative Black Caucus, ladies and gentlemen. But let me tell you, we have a lot of work left to do. The reason why it's so important is because the more we strengthen our community in terms of economics, the more jobs that we get. The more people that can get purchasing power to buy homes and things of that nature. So we have to make sure that we strengthen our HUD program. And so that is not going to happen unless we get to the polls, like Boris Miles said in 2014. We can't just vote in presidential elections. We have to vote in every election. That's right. We have to vote in every election and vote people that are going to represent your interests. And finally, I just want to talk a little bit about the Stand Your Ground law. Texas in 2007 passed House Bill 1815, which made Texas a castle doctrine state. The bill also allowed persons to carry concealed weapons in their vehicles and to and from their jobs. In 2007, Texas also passed Senate Bill 378, which made Texas a stand your ground state. Now, I'm going to read to you very briefly what the Penal Code says, because a lot of people have different suspicions, but I'm going to read you specifically what it says here. Texas Penal Code Section 9.31. This is self-defense. Except as provided in subsection B, a person is justified in using force against another when and to the degree the actor reasonably believes the force is immediately necessary to protect the actor against the other's use or attempted use of unlawful force. The actor's belief that the force was immediately necessary, as prescribed by this subsection, is presumed to be reasonable if the actor, 1, knew or had reason to believe that the person against whom the force was used unlawfully and with force entered or was attempting to enter unlawfully with force the actor's occupied habitation, vehicle, or place of business. So basically your house, your car, or your place of business. Unlawfully and with force removed or was attempted to remove unlawfully with force the actor from the actor's habitation, vehicle, or place of business. Or C, was committing or attempting to commit aggravated kidnapping, murder, sexual assault, aggravated sexual assault, robbery, or aggravated robbery. And 2, did not provoke the person against whom the force was used. And then finally, section 9.32, deadly force in defense of a person. A person is justified in using deadly force against another person, 1, if the actor would be justified in using force against the other under section 9.31, which I just read. 2, when and to the degree the actor reasonably believes the deadly force is immediately necessary, A, to protect the actor against the other's use or attempted use of an unlawful deadly force, or B, to prevent the other's imminent commission of aggravated kidnapping, murder, sexual assault, aggravated sexual assault, robbery, or aggravated robbery. B, the actor's belief under section A2 that the deadly force was immediately necessary as described by that subdivision is presumed to be reasonable if the actor knew or had reason to believe that the person against whom deadly force was used unlawfully and with force entered or was attempted to enter with their home. And so basically the only distinction between Texas and Florida is the provocation provision in Texas. Florida doesn't have a provocation provision. So therefore, hypothetically, if George Zimmerman, and it's not really hypothetically, it is what happened, I believe, he provoked the altercation that happened. Trayvon might have got the best of him, and then he pulls out his gun to shoot him. Texas, under Texas law, that wouldn't necessarily fly because you provoked it. Provocation is not included in Florida's penal code. So we still, I believe, need to tweak this law because this law is applied, I think Senator Ellis pointed out earlier, when the statistics show that when it's an African-American person that's claiming this defense, 9 times out of 10, it don't fly. Okay, that's just the reality. But when it's someone who's of another persuasion and ethnicity using it against an African-American, then they may get the benefit of the doubt. So what am I saying? We have to make sure that we vote because why? Who do you think the district attorneys are in the state of Texas? Okay? They're elected. Who do you think the judges are in the state of Texas? They're elected. And that's why it all goes back to the ballot box. Whether it's from your federal, your state, and your local elections, elections matter. Thank you.
I thank Representative Ron Reynolds for covering both of those areas. Let me just say, added to that, and I'm sure there'll be questions, even though we were not able to pass anything in statute dealing with the hubs, if you look in the appropriations bill, there is a rider that was placed in the appropriations bill that pretty much now indicates that the hub program for the state of Texas is going to be audited, which has never been done before, to hold them to what we expect to achieve. Now, that was put into the appropriations bill. It came through. The governor probably didn't know it was in there, but I want you to know it's in there. Now he found Representative Devon's money. And he can tell you about that. Let me call Representative Devon now for his comments. Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to be brief. I probably have the distinction of being the only member up here where the governor actually vetoed 2 of his bills. And the governor and I are friends, and so I sent him a note telling him he and I finally agreed on something when we decided to leave. But anyway, let me set the backdrop for this, because I know some of you may not quite understand what I'm about to say, but everything that happens in the legislature is political. I mean, absolutely everything. There are 95 Republicans in the House and 55 Democrats. And so much of the success that we have has to do with trying to overcome just the sheer numbers. And that sometimes is difficult, but as a group, I will tell you that the Legislative Black Caucus sometimes is able to do things that just looking at the numbers you might not assume we could do. Let me talk about the budget real quick, and I know Sylvester's on appropriations. I haven't served on appropriations since 1991. But let me see if I can set the backdrop for the appropriations bill. There's general revenue, which is the money that we get from Texans, adds up to be about $95 billion over the next biennium, and that's the next 2 years that we provide the budget for. And while we spend $95 billion, let me see if I can crank it up this way. For public education, for every dollar we spend in the whole budget and GR, 40 cents of that dollar is spent on public education. 40 cents out of every dollar we spend is spent on public education. Another 14 cents is for every dollar we spend is spent on higher education. And so if you look at it, it's already 54 cents out of every dollar that's gone just for public education, for education, either public or higher ed. And then if you add on the health and human services, for every dollar we spend 32 cents of general revenue on health and human services. And so when you add all that up, that's 95 cents. And yet we have a group of Republicans who show up in Austin who decide that we spend too much money in Texas. And we don't spend enough money in Texas. And so when you look at it, where would you suggest that we take the money away? Should you take it away from public ed, higher ed, or should you take it away from health and human services? That's the dilemma they find themselves in. And most of them show up and finally, looking kind of like a cow looking at a new gate when they realize that, wait a minute, there's not a whole lot to cut in Texas. Let me just depart from that and talk about several of the bills that I authored. The one that the governor vetoed was one that Senator Ellis and I sponsored, and we had a lot of fun with because what it did is it created a management district in Northeast Houston, and it would have allowed us to do some things that management districts do. And the governor, in his infinite wisdom, who obviously had read the bill, decided that he didn't like it because he said it annexed some people who didn't want to be annexed. And the truth of the matter was there were some whites, Anglos, in that management district who decided they didn't want to be in a colored management district. And that's the reality of it. The other veto that I was kind of looking at from the governor was there is when I was the chair of the Juvenile Justice and Family Issues Committee, one of the things I did is took a look around the state at all the zip codes where juveniles were coming from into the system. And it just, it struck me that one of the largest areas that they were coming from was zip code 77020, 77016, and 77093, and all of those were in my district. And so as a consequence, what I did is I decided that to take a look at why that was happening, and one of the reasons that was happening is because there was nothing for juveniles to do that would involve them in wholesome activities. And so Hester House, which some of you may know about, is in my district, and so I was able to get $4 million with the help of Mr. Chairman here to put into Hester House. That was about 3 sessions ago, and so I see my architect here, Mr. Willie Jordan. He's the one that started this because I called him and said, Willie, how much money would it cost? And you have about 30 minutes to tell me. What would it cost to enclose the swimming pool, to have a gymnasium that's enclosed, and have a health and fitness center? And he came back and told me, well, probably for $3 or $4 or $5 million we could do it. And so I went to Chairman Turner and I said, well, can I do this? And I started arguing with the folks on appropriations, and I told them that it was going to cost $10 million, and they said, well, we can't do $10 million. I said, well, can you do 6? And they said, no, we can do 4. And I said, I'd take it. That's what Willie told me. Then he called me this time and he said, Harold, I think we're going to need another $1 million. And so I said, okay. So I went to Chairman Turner and I said, Chairman, I need another $1 million for Hester House because I think ultimately we can have a facility that will help transform juveniles and provide a wholesome place for them to have activities. And so we did. We got the $1 million, and through Chairman Turner's assistance, we got the $1 million. I told Willie we got the $1 million. And then the governor vetoed the bill. And so I've been talking to the governor to explain to him that while he's giving money away to corporations who have these phantom jobs that they're creating, but this was a real project that would have helped thousands and thousands and thousands of children. But again, we'll still work on that. Let me talk about another bill. Our criminal justice system, which you'll hear, is most of us in here would probably agree with me that our criminal justice system fails us because you can be factually innocent and be found legally guilty in Texas. Particularly if you happen to be a person of color.
Thank you.
Let me say that again. You can be factually innocent but legally guilty in Texas. And all it takes is for you to show up in court. As a lawyer, I will tell you that I've had any number of instances where prosecutors and the court system really disrespects us. Some of you may have heard that I have filed articles of impeachment against a judge in San Jacinto and Polk County up there because this judge was actually texting the prosecutor and texting her questions to ask during the trial. I don't know of anything. When the media called me and asked me why would I do that, I said I can't think of anything worse, but I did think of something worse. Dr. Merlene Petrie, who is the history teacher here, in her book, Through Many Dangers, Toils, and Snares, talks about the life of early black legislators. One of those was a senator who lost his election, Rodney, by one vote. No, not Howland. He went to court, not Howland. He went to court to challenge his election. And the judge shot him dead in the courtroom and said, niggas don't talk to white people. And that's in her book, and I use that word because that's the word in her book. And if you'd like to read her book is titled Through Many Dangers, Toils, and Snares, and if you'll talk to her, she'll explain it to you. And I see the chairman getting up. Let me tell you the one bill that I also had that, I don't know how many of y'all still smoking marijuana, but it's like at church, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand and get served. But I do want you to know that I think that when I read the report that came to me that said blacks and whites use marijuana in the same proportion, but blacks are 12 times more likely to be arrested and convicted for possession of marijuana. I thought, well, okay, let me just change it then. So I filed a bill that would have permitted, if you had 1 ounce or less of marijuana, you would be given a traffic ticket, because it would be a Class C misdemeanor, not a Class B misdemeanor. The way we punish possession of marijuana in Texas is based on the volume that you have, and it can go all the way up to a second and first degree felony. But it stops at the lower end at a Class B. It didn't stop at a Class C, and so my bill would have allowed you to get a ticket for having 1 joint or 1 seed or one leaf or whatever. Whatever it is, I don't smoke anymore.
I thought that was fitting in for me to interrupt as chairman of the Caucus and his lawyer. But I do, before I call on the last speaker for this segment, I want you to take a look around and just look at the people that are in this room and the leaders that are in this room. Because I want to also recognize Constable Reuben Davis out of Fort Bend. We want to stand up. Former Senator Congressman Craig Washington is in the overflow room. Craig, good to see you here, man. And when you get a chance, if you'll walk over here, I appreciate it. And then the former chairman of the Lone Star Community College, who happened to be an African American, Randy Bates. Where's Randy? And then he also says that Randy will stand up because a little over a week from now, the Kappa Apple Side will be having their national convention in the city of Houston, and the person that is the grand polemarch, like the president of the Caucus Apple Side, happens to be out of Houston, and that's Randy Bates, who lives right here in this city. Good to have you, Randy Bates. The Kappas will be in town. And the reason why I say that, if you look around, there's enough influence and power in this room to really make anything happen in Harris and Fort Bend County if we have the collective will to make it happen. And that's one of the reasons why we're here tonight, is just to establish that collective will. Let me call on now for the last speaker for this segment before we go to question and answers, and that will be Representative Alma Allen, who sits on the Public Education Committee, and she will briefly cover some things that happen in education. Representative Alma Allen.
Sorry I was late this evening, I had a flat tire. too hot to have a flat tire, don't do that. I have it was my pleasure this year to serve on the Education Committee as the Vice Chair of Education. And I have some handouts over on the end, if we could get those out. I have 100. I didn't expect this massive crowd. I'm glad that's a problem for us this evening, but I have 100 handouts, which will be identical to what I'm saying here right now. This was a banner year for education. And as I said, it was my pleasure to serve. This is my second term serving on the House Education Committee, but my first term as Vice Chair. Now, I've served in the House now for 5 terms. This will be my 5th term. And you know my background is education, but you do know they did not put me on the Education Committee, right? Right. Because, and that goes with the number of people who are controlling. So remember that, it all goes back to the ballot box. So everything you wanted us to fix and everything you want us to fix tomorrow goes to the ballot box, and your vote is so, so, so important. I'm not going to talk about money, and I know you've heard a lot about the money. I'm going to let our chair talk about that because he's on the Appropriations Committee, and we worked together on it and held out for the monies, but I want him to have the pleasure of telling you about how much money we got this year. The first item on the sheet that I gave is the new graduation plan. First of all, I know that most of you know that the number of tests that the students will be taking this year has been reduced from 15 to 5. You know that? Isn't that wonderful? Reduced from 15 to 5 as of September the 1st when the governor signs it. So, and you do know that that was just a money proposition, don't you? All test companies making money and our children suffering and teachers suffering from that. So that was a real accomplishment to get that down to 5 tests for the children. And while I'm talking about it, I'll tell you what they are. Those tests will be English Language Arts 1, English Language Arts, and I'm talking about high school here. English Language Arts 2, Algebra 1, Biology, and U.S. History. They must pass those tests. The graduation plan this year has changed for students too. It replaces the current graduation plan with the foundation plan with 22 credits, which includes English Language Arts, 3 math, 3 science, 3 social studies, and I'm giving everybody a handout so you'll have this, and so you don't have to remember how many math and how many science my children have to take when I go. And this is one, I want you to keep the handout if you have it, if you have neighbors who need to know that this information when your children are going to high school. 3 social studies, 3 foreign languages, and 1 fine arts, and 1 PE, and 5 electives. For those of you who were interested in this past year, having your students take an elective so they could go into a field and learn and skills that will maybe help them get through college. That is a possibility that was allowed this year. It allows students to earn 5 endorsements on their diploma depending on what they want to offer. If you want to go into math and science, the STEMS program, business or industry, public service, any one of those, you can take those courses. And arts and humanities, you can take those courses and come out with a skill so that you can go through, maybe earn your way through college or any one of the multidisciplinary studies. It creates a distinguished level of performance for students. To earn a distinguished level diploma, students must complete the requirements for the foundation program with an endorsement and Algebra 2 credits. Must take Algebra 2. So. And that is one of the things that I admonish you with. If you're going to your schools, that you make sure that you have a qualified algebra teacher or Algebra 2 teacher on the staff. Sometimes our students don't have the qualified teachers, or they can't find the teacher, and they'll have a substitute there for an entire year. And if the teacher is not qualified for that position, you have to put a substitute there. You cannot just hire anybody. And so those of you who work closely with your schools, you want to be on top of that and encourage your principals to find a qualified teacher, because the children will suffer. Yes, they have to take it, and you're going to have a substitute all year long. The accountabilities this year for schools will be no longer the academic performance. It's going to be, your schools will be rated A, B, C, skip over the D, F. A, B, C, F. They're going to be held accountable for. This is what schools will be held accountable for. academic performance. These are the three basic things that they need to be held for: academic performance, financial performance, about how you use your monies and how you get monies to come to your school, and community and student engagement, which is vital and important for students. If communities and parents are involved, then schools and students tend to do better. And so that's going to be the measure for the accountability system. Basically, that is House Bill 5. It is very, very simple. And if you wanted to look it up, right at the bottom of the page, I gave you a website where you can look that up. And don't forget that everything we do, all of our meetings and everything are on cable TV. I know it comes on Uverse. AT&T has it. I don't know who else has it, but you can watch the proceedings, and I really would like for you to do that. You can watch it on your computer. And so, and anything else you want to find, you can go into the website and you can find that too. So those are basically the things that have happened on House Bill 5, one of the biggest bills to come out of education in a very long time. And I will let my chair talk to you about money. Thank you.
Thanks, Representative Brown. Just a couple of points, and then we're going to have you all to ask questions of any of us on things that you may want us to expound on, especially those of the local black press, and then we'll open it up for other questions. Let me just say on the financial end, on education, in the last session before last, we ended up cutting public education by $5.4 billion. It was a tremendous cut. In this legislative session, we pretty much added back close to $4 billion to public education, which will be a tremendous plus. So that's good news. And then on the other thing I want to highlight from the appropriation side, and this is on the electricity side. There are a lot of people who need assistance, okay, especially during the hot summer months. Every single month, you pay 65 cents per kilowatt hour on your electricity bill, and it's supposed to be going to assist seniors and low-income persons on a discount anywhere from 10 to 20%. But I'm pleased to announce to you that if for those individuals who qualify for this program, low-income, senior citizens in particular, let's say a family of 4 making under $30,000, let's just say that, in the month of September, instead of that discount being 10%, what it is right now, that discount will be 82% in September, okay? Now what that means, that if you're a senior, for example, low income, and your electricity bill is $200, you're going to see a credit of $164 in the month of September. Now, if you're not sure that you're on it, and you qualify for it, when you look at your electricity bill, if it doesn't say light up program, that means that you're not on it. But if you think you're qualified, you have until August the 10th to contact the Public Utility Commission. I think my staff and some people outside have the information on who to call or to get online, but you have until August the 10th to take advantage of that discount in September. And the beauty of it, come next year, May, June, July, and August, each one of those months, the discount will be 82% each and every month, okay? So it's important for people to get qualified. There are many people who are automatically qualified because they're on state assistance, but there are a lot of folks who are either unemployed, or there are a lot of seniors who just don't know about it. They need to self-enroll. So please get that information out, okay? Now, that is a very general overview of what occurred during the legislative session. I thought Madam Dean was going to talk a little bit more about the pro-choice issue, and that may come up during the course of the day in a second. You know, that may come a little bit later. But at this point, let me just say that there are some sponsors here. I think the Houston Sun, West Houston Sun. You have a question that you want to pose? You guys speak loud enough? You want a mic? Yeah. Is there a mic? Here we go. And while she's coming, let me also, City Councilman Andrew Burke. Where is he? City Councilman Andrew Burke, thank you. Please, Janetta Burners. Janetta, why don't you have him wave your hand? Just Janetta Burners. Board member on the provost, the city right here. former City Council and Fort Bend Independent School District Trustee, Cynthia Linton Gary. Thank you for being present. Okay, why don't you ask from the Houston side?
What practices would you encourage minority Texans to use in preparation for an election time and with the new voter ID requirements when they kick in?
Okay, Representative Miles, and I think Representative, you can take it from right there.
Let me make it very clear. There are,
and then when you finish, I'm going to ask Natasha from the Legal Defense, NAACP Legal Defense Fund to also chime in on that one.
there are only 7 forms of ID that the state of Texas is going to recognize for voter ID this election process. And I'll give each one of them to you. Okay? Hold on. Okay, I hear you talking. The Texas driver's license issued by the Texas Department of Public Safety. A Texas personal identification card issued by DPS. A Texas concealed handgun license issued by DPS. A U.S. military identification card containing the person's photograph. A U.S. citizenship certificate containing a person's photo. A U.S. passport. A new Texas election identification certificate issued by DPS. Those are the only 7 items that will be recognized for voter ID this process.
And let me just say,
Let me make it very clear. That is, a Texas student ID will not be one of those. It's not one of those 7. A Texas University ID will not be used. There's a lot of confusion back and forth, and they will not be accepting student IDs by Texas schools. Is that ridiculous or what? Okay.
now bear in mind, when the Supreme Court struck down a portion of the Voter Rights Act Section 4, it ended the pre-clearance. Okay, so the Justice Department doesn't have to pre-clear anything. Once the Supreme Court took that action, the Attorney General for the state of Texas came out immediately and said, we are now activating voter ID. Okay, we are now activating voter ID. We think, many of us, that he moved a little bit prematurely, but nonetheless, that's what the intent is. And now the NAACP, the Legal Defense Fund, is actively engaged in this battle. And so I'm going to call on Natasha Caucus, I think I got that, who's also a part of the fight, who graciously has flown in from New York to be with us this evening, and I want her to also to chime in on this issue.
Well, thank you for having
Give a warm Houston welcome to Natasha.
Thank you so much. I'm so thankful to be here and really grateful for your time. So, I have, as the representative said, been working on the voter ID issue. In the Section 5 case last year that we won, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund represented a group of students, actually, many of whom were from Texas Southern, and they were great, and some students from Prairie View as well. As the representative said, student IDs are amazingly not accepted under Texas's new voter ID law, and yet concealed handgun licenses are. That gives you, I guess, a sense of some of the priorities and values that are kind of embedded within the law. Just as a practical reality, I think, first of all, the most important thing is for people to help the folks you know get IDs. It can be a very difficult thing because driver's licenses, handgun licenses, and regular state IDs are often things that people don't have. And to get the so-called free ID, there's a lot of oftentimes expensive underlying documentation. But now is the time to start helping folks to get that documentation so that they have the proper IDs by the time that November comes around. In addition to that, though, I also want to say that it's really important with the voter ID issue and any other voting issues that come up, especially with the loss of the protections of Section 5 based on the Supreme Court's ruling earlier this year, to document very thoroughly all the voting changes that are happening in your community that you worry or suspect could have a negative impact on minority voting strength in your community. And that is at every single level, not only the federal level for congressional seats, but also at the state level, state redistricting we just talked about, and it's pretty wild here in Texas, but also at the local level, which I think gets a lot less attention oftentimes, but where some of the biggest harms to minority voting strength and minority political power can occur.
Don't go away, we're coming back to you, Natasha. Senator Ellis.
I was going to say, in addition to encouraging people to get the ID, if they don't get it, we ought to encourage them to get a mail-in ballot. And it was probably by design, they did not have it apply to mail-in ballots because generally people in minority communities don't do the mail-in ballots. So there's some new restrictions that somebody made reference to earlier on a mail-in ballot. But for people who are running, and there are many in the room, if you think there are a lot of people whose license might have been suspended, if you owe for a ticket, you lose it. So you ought to focus on that mail-in ballot program, like my dad, who's 92, and does not drive for good cause. So he doesn't have a driver's license, he doesn't have a passport, and we probably cannot get him out of the house to go get the state ID. So we would do a mail-in ballot.
And please understand, hold on 1 second, please understand the significance of it. For example, I know Lone Star had filed a lawsuit to go to single member districts. Lone Star, the trustees are elected at large, okay? Because there's no pre-clearance, you may have a community college like Lone Star decide we don't need to do single member districts. Galveston, that has some single member districts, they are thinking about now going back to an at-large system because pre-clearance is no longer in play. So this is a major, major, major issue. And you need, and we would ask you to contact your congressional folk, both Democrats and Republicans, and encourage them to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act, that formula. So that is very, very important. Now, don't just contact Democrats. Contact Democrats and Republicans. And you need to do it before you even leave here and get that done. Okay? I'll come to you. Let me get this press out the way first. Okay? One more.
When the Voting Rights Act was amended.
Is that the mic on?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay.
Once the Voting Rights Act was amended, what was the repercussion that stuck out the most in your head that you don't think the public body would pick up on?
Who wants to take that?
Are you talking about during the Bush administration?
No, I mean right now.
When it was struck down by the Supreme Court, when that part of Section 4.
Oh, the one thing that struck out in my mind is what was the far-reaching implications of it, other than just the right to vote. Right. Whether or not there was going to be other areas like business set-asides and things of that nature that would be impact. Whether or not desegregation would be impact. Just many issues along those lines where minorities have fought so hard to be able to acquire those rights. Right. And to kill those kind of vestiges that was a part of our culture at that particular time, whether or not that they were going to be reintegrated back in our society, and those were going to be fights that we were going to have to fight all over again.
One of the most important things that stuck out in my immediate mind was the redistricting. Because now they're allowed, with that being struck down, they're allowed to redistrict our districts and stretch us out. And our block of minority voting blocks will be stretched out. And we will just have to accept those lines because they won't have a pre-clearance anymore. That's the biggest fear for me, and should be for most of us electeds.
But one of the things I thought that maybe the savior of this would be Section 3 of the Voters' Rights Act, and that is the discrimination part. And if we can build a case around the discrimination part, then we have a shot at being able to do something. Isn't that correct?
Natasha, you want to chime in on that?
But the problem, I think, is that the burden of proof has shifted to us to prove discrimination versus the way it existed before all this happened. And of course, what that means is that most of the resources now that we have, we're going to have to shift over to that effort to kind of ensure that at least we continue to have even black elected officials. Because I'll tell you what my fear was is that we'll wake up tomorrow and find out that I've forgotten the name of that play, but there's a play where all the white people wake up one morning, all the black people, they can't find the black people, they can't find them, and so they're looking for them. Well, yeah, that's right, yeah, exactly, yeah. And that's what I thought about. I thought about they'll wake up tomorrow and we'll be like it was in the 1860s, where all of a sudden black elected officials were extinct.
Natasha, you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, so I just want to chime in, I guess, on the issue of what Section 3 is. Section 3 is a part of the Voting Rights Act that's very, very rarely used, but I think we can expect and perhaps even hope to see it used more often in the wake of the Supreme Court's decision. And that's a provision that enables federal courts to actually bail places back into a pre-clearance regime that are not subject to it anymore because of the Supreme Court's decision. So we may see increasing litigation that uses Section 3 and that tries to bring places back under pre-clearance. And Texas may be a good place for that because, as you all know, each of its statewide redistricting plans since, I think, 1972, when it first became covered, was actually blocked because it was initially discriminatory. And so I think that it is important to focus on Section 3 as a previously underutilized part of the Act, but maybe a tool that we're going to need to call upon more frequently now in Texas and in other formerly covered places.
Jay, glad you're on too.
Thank you very much. As you pointed out earlier, Texas is basically at the bottom when it comes to health care, providing care for its citizens. And the Affordable Care Act, the requirement that most American adults obtain health insurance, will become a reality in just a few months. By October 1st, the ACA requires that new state insurance exchanges be up and running to allow eligible individuals to apply by 2014 for health insurance policies. So what is the present state of the exchanges here in Texas? Are we ready to sign folks up? Can you elaborate?
Let's take that one.
The state of Texas, as you know, would not pass legislation to set up an exchange. In fact, the only southern state to go ahead, 2 southern states agreed to take the Obamacare money. Arkansas worked out a unique plan, which Texas could have done, and Florida. Some of us had a brief visit with the president when he was in Austin, and his comment was, hey, my people have been briefing me, and I know y'all fighting the good fight in Texas, but you know you're going to lose. This was during the session in terms of getting it passed. There will be a rollout of a number of not-for-profit groups that are going to have federal exchanges that are set up in Texas. And we're going to do our part through our offices, each of our offices individually and collectively. I'm sure the congressional people will do it. That will be a massive rollout to the extent we can do it. Look, Texas is important in this because part of making Obamacare work, by the way, is you got to get more people in. I mean, that's what insurance is sharing the risk. And when you leave out a big state like Texas, it matters, which is why the Obama administration was doing everything reasonably possible, sending all of the smoke signals to work and make it work for Texas. The president also made the comment that after one more election cycle, this is his prediction, after one more election cycle, these outlaw states, meaning Texas, will come on board. That's just so much money to turn down. So, your station, your media outlets will play an important role because most of those 1.5 million people that would come under the expansion obviously are African American and Hispanic. There are a lot of low-income whites as well. But so look, there is hope. We just got to do our part.
You have another question, Jay, before I go?
I'm sorry, one second. Very briefly. Texas leads the nation in the number of uninsured. There is no reason why Texas would not expand in terms of doing Obamacare other than politics. It was all about politics. This was the extreme right-wing Tea Party saying we don't want to be a part of it, even though Texas could have narrowly tailored its own plan. Texas could have had the Texas plan. They just didn't want to do it simply because it was from President Obama. That's the fact. We couldn't even debate the issue on the House floor. It wasn't even subject to debate. And there were a lot of Republicans who quietly said this makes sense. We're losing billions of dollars in federal funding. The hospitals were with it. The Texas Medical Association was with it. It made sense. We're going to lose a lot, and there's no reason why we didn't do it other than politics, and that was your Governor Rick Perry.
Let me just say, just to try to tie 2 things, and I'm sure that President Thompson can chime on this. We have had a huge debate over pro-life, pro-choice, however you choose to define it. Okay, however you choose to define it. And I'm always amazed by people who are pro-life. I'm always amazed. Because the reality is, as Sondela said, for $52 million, we could have pulled down $4 billion, which would have helped a lot of uninsured adults and children in the state of Texas. A lot of them. Because there are a lot of children that are uninsured, who are hurting, and you don't have to question whether or not they feel pain. They will tell you they are in pain, okay? But at the same time, we are willing to allow all of those dollars to remain in D.C. and allow literally millions of folk to go uninsured while we are fighting these other battles. And I think for those who are pro-life, what I would simply say, pro-life does not stop at the womb. Pro-life comes when you see them each and every day. And so we just need to kind of keep things in their proper perspective. Another question before I move on. Yes. Forward Times.
Jeffrey Boney, Houston Forward Times. My question, first of all, I have a comment. I believe it will be extremely helpful for all of the elected officials, just like you're doing here tonight, after you come with laws and finish your sessions, that you get that information collectively to us here at the Black Press so that we can communicate that to our many readers and people in the community that really need that information. There are many people that couldn't make it tonight and I'm sure would want to have that information, so we really would appreciate that going forward. My question is related to some of the comments that were made earlier. Representative Reynolds mentioned about how there's a big fight about HUB participation at the state level, which is very needed. Him and Representative Miles fighting along with the TLBC to get some things changed and strengthened, putting teeth behind it. But Representative Sophronia Thompson mentioned about the $80 million that will be coming to now Houston Independent School District for the athletic facility as well as the new high school. There was a letter that was sent out from the Houston chapter of the National Association of Minority Architects, and it was sent to all African American elected officials as well as the Black Press and HISD about the $1.89 billion in bond money that was actually voted on by the public. And that letter indicated that they believed and had facts that showed that African American architects were not being awarded contracts in their fair share of contracts from HISD in their decision-making process. Many in the community have called us at the Forward Times, and actually we've written about it, about the actual disparity in contracting. And many in the community believe that there's been a deafening silence from black advocacy organizations as well as the black elected officials about this disparity. So my question is for all of the elected officials, what are your thoughts about this supposed disparity and what is going to be done about it?
Well, let me start this here. I have actually been in conversations with the architects, the black architects, generally. And, you know, in taking a look at this thing, though, I think there's a larger problem, too, that we've got to address, and that is the extent to which all of these government organizations who have what's called, quote, professional contracts that they let ignore the black community when it comes to whether it's architects, whether it's legal services, whether it's anything that falls under that professional umbrella. I just think that we got to do something to make this work, beginning with the architects, because they're the ones who have now been most affected. But when I looked at HSD and in terms of, for example, professional services relates to lawyers, you know, they're non-existent when it comes to money that is taken from this community and ends up going to firms in Chicago and other places. You know, I look at that and I go, well, wait a minute now. That's not what we were told when we started down this road of approving these bonds. And so I think it's incumbent upon all of us, and I think black elected officials ought to lead the way at enforcing what I think is only equitable and fair to the black community. That we've got architects in this city, and I know a whole bunch of them. One of them sitting here, I see Willie Jordan. I think Jimmy Walker may be around here somewhere. Yeah, and so I've had conversations with Jimmy as well, who came all the way to Austin to talk about it, because he recognizes that all of these gentlemen have actually built schools, designed schools in HSD, but during this last go-round, somehow or another, the HSD, somehow or another ignored them and have gone other places. That is wrong. But the only way it's going to change is if we do something about it. And I think, I'm going to talk to our caucus and see if we can, Mr. Chairman, if we can design or require or ask or request or demand a meeting with HSD so that we can all sit down and see if we can come to some kind of understanding. Because this is not the last bond election they're going to require. And as you know, when we had bond elections before, we have had to stand in the gap and say no to HIG. And I think if that's the way we're going to be treated, as I said before, the thing we used to say in the 60s is, if they don't respect us, is that wrong? They need to expect us. That's right. That's right.
If I can add to that, I think a lot is based on how we are perceived. Whether or not we are perceived to be a united, unified community, or whether or not we are perceived to be individualistic and weak. One of the reasons why we wanted to have this town hall meeting in a collective sense is that it's important for people even within our community and outside our community to see us coming together in a collective, unified fashion. And we haven't done that in a long time. And quite honestly, it is unfortunate that it takes a travesty, whether in this city or in this state or in some other state, to bring us to attention. And in this case, it's Trayvon Martin. Okay? But I think it's how we are perceived. So that when we do go in and say that, look, we produce when it comes to the election, but it doesn't just stop there. We also need to see it in terms of those who are doing business that look like us, that our voices carry greater weight. Now, as elected officials from the state, it's important for us to work with those African Americans and other people of color that are on the school board, because you can't just oversee, you got to work in tandem. And so we've got to be on the same page. And I think you see that tonight because there are many people from the school boards that are here. But I do believe that oftentimes we don't get much because we don't demand or ask for much. And that we are willing to accept far less than we rightfully deserve. And so, if we're going to tell our young boys and our young girls to have high self-esteem, then those of us who are adults and those of us who hold leadership positions got to start asking on a higher plane and not being satisfied with individual achievement or individualistic gains. And so I hear you. I hear what the advocates have said. I do not deny that whether it's HISD, whether it's the state of Texas. Okay? It's not just HISD. It's the state of Texas that needs to do more. But it's so important for us to get out in a collective fashion. We've got to vote like we've never voted before. We've got to be more supportive of each other like we've never been before. And when people see that, when people see that they can't get to Harold and work to bring me down, or get to me to bring Representative Miles down, or get to Representative Reynolds, or Representative, when they see that we are collectively and we are unified and we speak with one voice, and that the black press and the black business community and the black officials are operating on the same table, then I think you will start seeing things happen. Okay, and I'm optimistic. We'll visit with the superintendent.
We just need to go back to being Negroes instead of black people.
What
Harold just said makes sense. Think about it. Back in the day, Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. I can tell you, Jeff, that I was part of the group that went to the superintendent, Dr. Greer, and said, we don't want to have the same experience we had with the last bond. We got verbal assurances. William Traylor was there with the Black Chamber, other people. Sylvester knows that we told Dr. Greer Rhonda Skiller Jones arranged a meeting. We said at the table, look, our community is sick and tired of being sick and tired. We can't have the same thing that happened before. So the vote was largely cast on the backs of African Americans. Our community passed that bond. So we are losing millions of dollars from our community because of the lies that were told to us. I'm just going to be real with you. This is a damn shame that we don't have more African Americans getting dollars on this bond. So Sylvester, we got to make sure that in the future, unless we get written assurances, we will not support those bonds because those bonds are paid with our tax dollars. And we can't have this happen again.
Okay, let me just say, we hear you. Jimmy, we have heard you. Terry Smith, I notice we've heard you. All times we hear you. Now let us put together a constructive plan to make something constructively happen. Because the reality is, I will agree, people like myself stood out in front and asked for you to support the bond. Okay? And I did. And I certainly did. I stood up and I said support the bond. Okay? And at the end of the day, I'm prepared to accept responsibility if we end up getting jacked. And I ask, along with others, for you to support the bond. So it's not about just Cherry Green.
That's right.
You know, I endorse that note. And I intend for the note to be good. So let's just work on it. I got you. We heard it. Okay, we're not going to solve it tonight, but your point is well made. Okay, next question. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm sorry. Let me deal with the first person. Okay. Yes.
I just want to say, most of you know me. They just amazing event. I love black people.
So introduce yourself for those who know. You got the big magazine in the city. Come on.
I'm the owner of D-Small.com business, one of the oldest largest business journal in the city. And so we like to inspire, inform, and educate people about our African American community. And when we see stuff like this, it's a beautiful thing. And one of the things I just want to say to my elected officials and my friends, I got this thing that I want to call about, like the call fact, it's the fact. Just giving us that information to the community that we know. What I realized, a lot of things is that it goes unnoticed. And when an African American official do something wrong, the Chronicle gonna have it everywhere in the world. But when stuff in our community, we got to say something, we don't have a voice. But a lot of times you just don't send it to you because I'm dedicated to put it out there. And even with some of these large companies, we went to a conference, this is amazing, a huge company, and one of the council members was with me, and I took him in there with me. And this company, they had a leadership conference, like 300 senior vice people and one African American. And they got so much business in the city and the state. That's ridiculous. We should put that on blast and make them say, you need to open up and start hiring some minorities, especially African Americans. So I challenge you guys, send it to me, I'm down. The facts. If it's a true fact, I try to stay neutral in certain things, but if it's a fact, it's a fact. And we want you guys to send us those facts so we can let our community know what's going on.
Gotcha. Is there another question for the president? I'm going to throw it open. There's any question out here. I think there are two mics right there on the side. If you go to the mics, we'll appreciate it. There are two mics right on each side. Let me just say that there's May Walker, the Councilman May Walker is also present. She's in overflow. Judge Joel Clouser from Fort Bend is in the overflow as well, and I indicated that former Congressman Craig Washington is here and he's in the overflow. Okay, let me also introduce, but I also want to make note that there are two other people who are here. You've already heard from Natasha, but there's I know Pastor Max Miller is present. And if my staff will come where I am, I'd appreciate it. Is Amin Alhassan, I think I got that last night. Is Amin present? Allison, is Amin here? Okay. Because Amin is with the Texas Civil Rights Project. I want to hear from him in a little bit. And then Gary is also here with Nova. I want to hear from him in a little bit. Let me take this first question right here.
Can y'all hear? Okay. Greetings. I'm glad to have you all here today. I present myself as a social worker. I'm a healthcare social worker, community social worker. I have a nonprofit in the community. My question, and I'm more along the lines of Representative Dutton, about it's time to stop the black people, it's time to be the Negroes again. I feel like we have been blessed to have the favor of the legacy that was built by some of you, some of our ancestors. My question now is, how do we demand more outside of just saying we need to get more people to vote? I feel that...
One second. Okay, we'll stay focused. They'll take care of him or her over there.
How do we demand more? I know this is going to sound a little bad, but the reality is everyone is not going to vote. I think part of it is we still have to get my generation, the collegiates, more inspired to vote more.
Is there a medical person? If there's a medical person here, if you would come over to the corner, okay? Okay, I'm sorry. Give me the question again.
So the question is, how do we demand more outside of voting? Because I'm at the point, I feel like it's time to be more radical.
How do you demand more? How do you demand more outside of voting?
Yes, I know that's, take like what other grassroots.
What's the address, Dr. Bullock? Okay. Okay, if everybody else will kind of just come and sit down, okay. How do we demand more outside of voting?
Expanding our strategy, correct.
Okay. Representative Denton.
I think you do it one house and one block and one street and one community at a time. I mean, I think you start where you are and you move from there. I mean, it's not going to happen over.
Is there a doctor here? I'm sorry, is there a doctor in it? Okay, someone's been talking about that. Representative.
But I think that's what you got to do. People come to me all the time with some idea, some scheme they got, where they're going to save the whole world. And then I ask them, I said, well, have you saved anybody at home? And so what I'm trying to say to you is that I think for all of us here, most of us have the idea that we can make a difference. But we all know somebody who doesn't believe that. And particularly when you get down to the lower age groups, they don't feel that, and so they turn off. Well, I think it's incumbent upon each of us to make sure that doesn't happen, and to somehow or another re-energize them. There's probably not a whole bunch of people here that I can see who are 21 years of age and younger. But that's where you start, and that's what I think you got to do. I don't think you do it any other way.
And let me just a quick response. I'm going to ask all of us to give very quick responses. Let me just say, just like over the past couple of weeks, we've seen people at City Hall. I think that's great. We've seen people marching. I think that's fine. Everybody can do something. Not everybody's going to march. Not everybody's going to attend a rally. But whatever you can do, you can do. But what I will say, and I will not back up on, is that African Americans still have not voted to the degree and at the percentage that they should be voting. Now there are certain things that do work. There are certain things that work. One of the reasons why people were so eager to get rid of the pre-clearance and to put in voter ID is because they recognize that when African Americans show up in huge numbers, we're able to have major results. And so when we are voting at 60% instead of 30%, when we start voting at 70%, then I think we can start looking at some other tools. But we are not utilizing the tool that we presently have. And when we do that, things will happen, I promise you.
Okay, let me add one more thing.
I'm sorry, I got to hold you. We're going to have others. Let me go over here, and I'm coming over here.
Yes. Thank you very much for the forum. I very much appreciate it. At 83 years old, I will say that I have, with the blessings of my husband, God rest him, held community mental health forums free at the Shea Community Center for 24 years.
That mic is not on, I'm sorry.
Mic is not working. It's on, but it's not working. Okay. I will endeavor to use my get out of the bathroom upstairs voice.
Right, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. For 24 years, sponsoring community mental health forums free
Yes,
at
ma'am.
Shea Center
Yes,
to
ma'am.
say we do not need psychotropic drugs, electric shock, or Ritalin for our children. We need to know our history. Our history is shocking enough. There is a genocide law. The Genocide Accountability Act of 2007 has not been implemented in the matter of...
Yes, ma'am. So give me the question.
That's the question. Why have we not applied the Genocide Accountability Act of 2007 in the matter of police killings and brutality directed at people of color, Black, Latino, and I have had complaints from Asians as well.
I think it's going to be very important for somebody to bring that lawsuit based on that act. I think when that happens, it puts it directly into the courthouse and it can be exercised.
I wrote to Attorney General Holder.
Yes, ma'am.
Just a minute. He didn't answer my letter. I wrote to my New York State Assembly person, who is a European American, Robert Sweeney. He answered and wrote to Holder, who said, no, we will not be implementing the Genocide Accountability Act in the matter of police killings. There was 40,000 lynch murders in America.
And I got you. And we understand the position that you're taking on that, and we will follow up on it.
Because I have written to people and
Yes,
get
ma'am.
no answer.
Yes, ma'am. Well, you have made it noted here today, and I promise you we will follow up on it. Okay?
Thank you.
You're more than welcome. Yes, ma'am.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. I come here today due to the invitation that I heard on the radio in regards to the Trayvon Martin debate that you were going to have here today. So I am kind of using this as my opportunity to try to get help. I'm here as a mother.
Okay.
Today, in regards to the verdict that came down on the Trayvon Martin, that has kind of wrecked our family. Hello?
The mic keeps going out.
Okay, well, the question is, I understand that there's supposed to be resources and help and services available for us here. Monday.
Just tell me what the resources.
Monday marked the anniversary of my baby's murder based on the stand and defend.
Okay.
And we can't get help. And the reason why the murderer was never arrested is because no one knew about it. The Martin family, and pardon me for saying this, were lucky in a sense that theirs went viral. And they had to push with the backing of the NAACP to even get an arrest on this. We're not able to get any help. My husband, we've been fighting and fighting and fighting. My ex-husband keeps getting arrested on countless charges. So we're trying to find out exactly who we can get in contact with to get us help with at least bringing our case to court.
To explain the situation in your case. Where's
Right.
Murray?
We can't even get that far.
Okay, why don't you talk to the director of the Legislative Black Caucus? Okay, Murray Matthews. Okay? I think that's it.
Let me just say one quick thing, and this goes kind of to the first question. One of the things that we don't do as a community is serve on juries. We got to make sure that we stop throwing that jury summons away and participate and serve on juries. That will help us get justice. I can tell you that.
Okay. Judon Bonat, I skipped over you. Let me come to you, and then I'm coming over there. Judon.
There were 3 public policy flight laws we took in the last 90 days. One was the stand your ground law. The other, which hasn't been mentioned tonight, was affirmative action. And the third was the Voting Rights Act. we have a way of saying that the Nile is not just a river in Egypt. You have all said and emphasized the need to change the electorate and change the elected officials.
Right.
10 years ago, we established the National Council for Black Civic Participation out of Washington, D.C. as a national organization. We formed the Houston chapter, and we allowed it to lapse. This will not change if we don't have a sustained, year-round, staff, nonpartisan, voter registration, education program, period. We know that. So why, I would challenge, make a suggestion, a solution, that the caucus convenes the community and the elected and non-elected and community leaders with one agenda item: how to deal and respond to attack and disenfranchisement of black and minority voters, how to respond to photo ID, and how to establish this funded, staff, year-round, nonpartisan voter registration education program. The Houston chapter of the National Black Civic Participation Organization still exists. It's just lapsed.
Okay. And point well noted. We can follow up with you on that, Judah. Yes, sir. Let me get this question at the microphone.
Good afternoon, sir. I'd like to ask you a question. I am a concealed handgun instructor. I do teach the chapter 9 of the Penal Code backwards and forward. How you doing, Mr. Ellis? So my name is Michael Damaris, and I would like to know what you guys, because I teach our people that law that they have, 9.41, 9.42, to be able to defend their house with use of force and deadly force. So what would you guys, provocation is the biggest thing that did not come up with the Florida case, but it does work here. We have Crystal Scott, a black female, who's on trial for murder for shooting the white individual last year. Nobody's covering that in the media right now. All right, we got a girl right here trying to defend herself in Harris County. Her name is Crystal Scott. Look her up on the Indian media. Reverend Dixon was on the news. What do you guys want to see changed in the wake of that? Because I personally believe some of those laws help us. Yes, it depends on your defense, but how? And Republicans are not going to really come down on a lot of that stuff. But
the question is,
how would you guys like to see that change or talk to our people?
Here's what, Senator Ellis, and then Gary, if you want to chime in on that one, I'll let you chime in if you want to.
Yeah, here's what I would suggest. You're right. The likelihood of repealing the Texas version of stand your ground, of castle doctrine, meaning you can protect your house, the likelihood of that being repealed is probably close to zero. So what I call for is simply review the laws that are in place in Texas and see if they have a disproportionate impact on certain groups of people. You kind of make the case. When, sort of like that discovery statute that we passed in Texas. Look, every state in the country has one. Supreme Court says, hey, it's just basic, it's fundamental. If the prosecution knows something will exonerate you, they'll give it to you. But in Texas, we didn't do it. Now, if you had Craig Washington or Harold Dutton representing you get your stuff. But if you had some legitimately court-appointed lawyer in there working for the judge, would that happen? Well, we passed that statute because there were lessons we learned from some guy in jail, wrong guy, 25 years, and it passed unanimously. So I did a debate with one of our colleagues, Dan Patrick, on Channel 2 last week. I'm not crazy. I'm not going to get on there and say, just go repeal it. Although he tried to put those words in my mouth, I'm saying go look at it, see if it has a disproportionate impact. The broader issue that I saw out of the Trayvon Martin case, by the way, was a lot of times in this country, your income determines if you're innocent. You get me mad walking out of here, I don't have a license, but I'll knock you in your head and kill you. You kill me. If you got enough money to hire the right legal defense team, the hate crowd got involved to raise money for Mr. Zimmerman. So he had a dream team in terms of his legal defense. Real challenge is, in so many of our cases, we don't have the resources to have that dream legal defense team. So we've got to make sure we do a better job of putting more money into indigent defense.
Good deal. Right here. Yes, sir.
I think I need to say thank you, Jesus, for helping this brother get up first.
And thank you to those firefighters, so when I dialed 911, gave it to the dean, he gave me the address, so they could get it. If I call like y'all call me some medical help, by the way.
I understand, I'm with you. Two observations that,
Before you speak, let me just add one thing. Would you allow me? One of the things I want to add to the senator's statement is this. I want to thank the people from District 141 for allowing me to go to the session and pass 25 House bills and 15 Senate bills. One of the bills that I passed that didn't make it through the Senate was House Bill 990, which was going to allow us to look at all of our criminal laws, which would have been this bill as well. And we were going to be able to look at it in many different facets, from a racial point of view, from a minority point of view, from a point of view of finance, and then whether or not that law should be eliminated, reduced down from a criminal a felony to down maybe to a ticket offense. And I wanted just to thank you for letting me put that in.
Yes, sir. Question.
number one is that we're talking about joining in. And next month, there is a celebration of 50 years of the March on Washington.
August 24th.
So we're trying to get some support from our community and getting at least 2 buses of young people there. We're looking for sponsors. So I'm saying the unity starts here. Because right now there's nobody from Houston heading in that direction. And if you don't want to go there, this Miss Loretta Brock, could you stand Miss Brock? She's the coordinator for that event in Washington, D.C. We're trying to get 2 buses of young people, because 50 years from now I won't be here. You won't be here either, Rodney. But this coming Saturday, there's going to be a rally. Mr. Turner,
Yes, sir.
there's going to be a rally.
Yes, sir.
People with civil rights issues stand up with the elite ladies of expression. Those of us who can need to be involved in activities at home. I understand Trayvon Martin, but we had a situation the other day where a woman had to kill her brother because of the lack of mental health services in this town. And you thank God that you got some extra money passed. We got a lot of sick folk in our community.
I agree.
And so I just want to ask y'all, could y'all work better with us? Because those of us in the community are working real hard. Real hard.
Point well made. Point well made.
That's a point well made. I do want to point out, by the way, you notice how much weight I lost? I won't be here 50 years from now. Some of y'all need to ride a bike, or you need to get y'all have to ride a bike and stop going to jail and live on this way.
Amin, why don't you come over here? Amin is with the Texas Civil Rights Project, and I know that they have a community meeting that's coming up on Saturday, August the 3rd, and it's going to be right here on Saturday, on August at 11 a.m. Amin, why don't you just say hello to Steve and talk about what the Texas Civil Rights Project are.
Hi, thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me, Sylvester Turner, Representative Turner. My name is Amin Al-Hashem. I am the Regional Director of the Texas Civil Rights Project here in Houston. We are a pro bono, nonprofit civil rights organization with over 20 years of history in Texas, but about a year of history here in Houston. A few months ago, thanks to the generosity and the hospitality of the NAACP here in Houston, their board, Reverend Lilly, Dr. James Douglas, Yolanda Smith, and the gracious help of Senator Rodney Ellis, we were able to move in right next door to the NAACP back in April. Since then, we've been engaged in a number of initiatives in the community, but most notably, a couple of weeks ago, after the Supreme Court's horrific decision in the Voting Rights Act case, we decided that we had to do something in order to fill the vacuum created by the hole in the legislation. Everyone knows that we can't wait on Congress to act. If you look at the polls, no one has faith in Congress to do anything these days. So until and if they do that, we've decided to act, and this is going to require help from all of you and all of the people on this panel. The idea is to organize around this issue, keep our eyes and ears on the ground, and you are the eyes and ears. You are the ones that fuel everyone here. And You are the ones that need to tell us when you hear about voting inconsistencies. One of the representatives mentioned single-member districts changing to at-large voting districts, especially when it comes to the schools. Those are really important, the local elections, because everyone's focused on who's president or who's senator, but really what matters in your day-to-day life is who's teaching your kids, who's in charge of those schools. And so I'm going to encourage you to write this number down, our telephone number, 832-767-3650, and I'll repeat that again later. But we do pro bono civil rights litigation, which means we don't charge for our services, and we don't do criminal stuff though. So we get a lot of calls, people thinking, you know, that they have certain cases. We can't really help in that, but there's police abuses of power in certain ways, you know, all sorts of those sorts of things. But if you don't know, call us and we'll try to help, you know, get you at least to the right place. One more time, the number 832-767-3650. Thank you very much. 832-767-3650. We are the Texas Civil Rights Project here in Houston. We are right next door to the NAACP.
And your name, sir?
Oh, my name is Amin, A-M-I-N. Last name Allah Hashem, A-L-E.
Just call him Al.
Just call me Al. That'll work. Thank you again.
Thanks, Amin. Now, unfortunately, we're going to take about just a few more questions. I'm going to take three. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I know. I'm going to take three. You may be the third, but I'm going to take three. Okay, Ben, hit the mic.
You know, there's a lot of issues that affect...
If we can just stay together, okay? Ben.
A lot of the same issues affect the Hispanic community as do the black community. And I think it's so important that we have coalitions. So my question to you, Mr. Chairman, in your opinion, during this last session, which bill did the Black Caucus and the Hispanic Caucus really come together to make a difference?
Well, let me just say, in the Texas House and Texas Senate, most of those, let's speak from a Democratic point of view, the Democratic Party right now is primarily African American and Hispanic. And so when it comes to all of those bills, whether it was education, whether it was mental health funding, whether it's criminal justice, African Americans and Hispanics pretty much voted hand in hand on almost every single one of those issues.
And for the last 20 to 30 years.
Yeah, so that's been the case. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, good evening.
Hold on, 1 second. If you just hold, I guarantee you, we're not going to be here, and we can all leave together, okay? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Janelle Robles, and I work with the Texas Criminal Justice Coalition. We identify and promote smart justice policies to reduce our state's over-reliance on incarceration. And we are actually organizing that event that's taking place in this same room on Saturday, August 3rd at 11 a.m. It's a criminal justice legislative town hall, and we want to talk about the new criminal justice laws in Texas as well as the problems facing our justice system. And I want to thank the legislators for all of your work on justice issues in the legislature. And I just wanted to ask a question. Senator Ellis and others mentioned the disparities in our justice system, especially how African Americans are getting arrested and incarcerated at much higher rates than their white counterparts. So I wanted to ask if there are any specific reforms that the community can get behind to try to reduce those disparities.
Senator Ellis, you want to take that one?
One is to do as much as you can to protect this public defender's office in Harris County. For most laws that come up, like Ms. Thompson's law, was amazing that she got that bill out of the House, couldn't get a hearing in the Senate. The prosecutors do a good job of arguing their side. But on our side, you don't have that institutional base. And it comes to public defender's office. You all done a great job in Jefferson County, right down the road, in Fort Bend County. We make it a big push to expand that public defender's office. That's a big part of it. Look, we passed a bill that's going to require reporting of caseload status. I think that was either me and you or Sylvester, I can't remember. But that's an important bill so you can see how many people are getting these court-appointed lawyers. You can't stop them. But at least it has to be public to know. We passed the DNA testing statute. So if there's DNA anywhere, if I'm killed right here, I can't require in the death penalty case that you test all of the DNA in this room, but I can require you to test it in this area. And that's a big investment. But you all got to raise more cane. You got to file more lawsuits. I'm encouraging the legal defense fund. We're going to try to raise them some money. I think at an event coming up in September here in the Houston area. But when you go to court, it helps make the case for us to do reforms down the road.
Thank you. Over here.
Hello, thank you so much for holding this forum. But my concern has been that this is after the fact. The legislative session ended, and we didn't have these conversations beforehand. And now that we are all activated by Trayvon Martin's case, by the Voting Rights Act, my question tonight is, when can we get a commitment from you all to have more of these kinds of conversations so we can set the agenda for the next 2 years and be ready so that we can be activated? I only learned about tonight from the Houston Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta, because our social action chair sent out a message. I'm on everybody's list some kind of way, but I didn't get it from you all. Now, I know Magic 102, 97.9, the Black Press activated their social media accounts, but we didn't see this all over Facebook and Twitter either. Where is this? I did get it from Rodney Ellis on Twitter. But I'm just saying, we are not getting enough from all of you in order for us to support you, and you're not asking us enough for our opinions to help.
Fair enough, but let me just also say,
My question though is, what's the commitment to getting us activated for those 2 years to get ready for the next session?
Can I just respond, Mr. Chairman? One of the things, and I don't want to embarrass anybody in here, but is there anybody in here who doesn't know who their state representative is?
No, mine is not here. I'm not happy about it.
No, but I hope that, first of all, that you ought to start a dialogue with that person. You ought not wait until we come together as a group to try to figure out what we need to do. You ought to start by talking to your state representative and your state senator, even when you leave here. Because most of us have at least 2 of those. You have a state representative where you live, and you have one where you work. And yet, most of the time, we send out all kinds of information trying to get people to respond back to us. And nobody says anything. And so if you want to be really proactive, and you really feel that, then you ought to call them. In fact, when you leave here, you ought to call and find out why yours is not here.
I already tweeted him. I want to know where he is. But I'm saying, when you don't get those responses, and this is the Texas Legislative Black Caucus, we want all of you to work on all of our behalf. So yes, we will work with our individuals.
Good. We accept that. That's a good start. Let me say. We accept that because we can all do more. Okay, we can all do more. So that's a given. And I think I think what it demonstrates, though, the fact that you're here, is that when we work in conjunction. Yeah, we don't. Ms. Thompson's point out, we still in session. I got that 9:45 tonight. But the point is that when we work in conjunction with the Black press, okay, the Black press, the Black media, legislators coming together, we can make a tremendous difference. Lastly, please bear in mind that we did invite all of you to come to Austin in February for the Legislative Black Caucus Conference. 4,000 of you came, and we appreciated that as well. Okay, I'm sorry, but this is going to be the last one.
Before we make that the last, can we at least hear from the young brother make him the last?
Okay.
I see the young brother got to say.
Okay, we're going to start with him. I'm with you now.
And Mr. Chairman, I want to thank the Black media for helping us. Without you all, we would not have this group here tonight. Thank you.
And I want to thank our chairman for putting this together and leading us through all this.
Let's get to this brother right here.
Wanted to find out, will there be a problem when we actually go out this time to register for people to vote? One of the things that a lot of us have talked about is us coming together and getting people more involved. Because like you're right, they're not going to get involved in just voting this time and then the next time. But will it be okay to get people or ask them about getting involved in some type of human rights organization? Women, NAACP, Hispanic, will that, when you're speaking about registering someone to vote, is there a problem of getting them involved in human rights organizations, something like
It's
that.
it's a good thing to do it. And look, you know, that the things you can do, there are going to be local elections coming up. You know, most of the stuff that we do on the state level, you know, people do the groundwork during the interim. I mean, you ought to make the case for folk who run for city council that they ought to put issues as part of that legislative package. The logic to expand for Medicaid reform.
Senator, let me know
In the same vein, if I could just add.
One second, let me know Natasha answer that too.
So just to answer your question, I think that it's state specific whether you can approach people and asking them to register to vote and also talk about other issues. So I have to say candidly, I don't know the specific state law, but it is worth looking into and making sure that that's okay. Because I have heard that in Texas there's been a wave of anti-registration laws that have been percolating, and I think hopefully not many, if any of them, have passed. But I think it's something to look into and just make sure it's okay to talk about issues at the same time as registration. Because there are places where it's not okay, just I'm not sure.
Good. Let me take this lady, I'm gonna take you, and then I'm coming here. One second, wait.
Just kind of in the same vein of the voter registration, it's section 3. Is there any way we can be proactive rather than reactive under section 3 of the Voting Rights Act? I have not read it, so I don't know what it says, but is there any way to be
Natasha?
proactive and not wait until they redistrict us and then we're reacting and behind the ball on that? Thank you.
To answer your question, Section 3 requires actually the filing of a lawsuit. But I think that what the gentleman said earlier, about being aware of the changes that are being made in your community, the voting changes, and being the eyes and ears, because any lawsuit that may be brought about one of those changes, whether it's at the state level or a local change going back to at-large voting, something fishy like that, could be brought in tandem with a Section 3 claim. And that's why I think it's very important to be aware of changes and to let the NAACP Legal Defense Fund or any of your representatives know.
Okay. So if I might, I do want to say the real challenge with pre-clearance being knocked down is we don't have a federal government filing a lawsuit for us. Legal Defense Fund is a not-for-profit. And it has been a good case to prove that somebody intentionally did it is a very challenging thing to do. People come up with slick schemes to act like they did not intend to discriminate. And we were lucky in the Texas case. I mean, the courts found those were all instances of the people knew what they were doing and they intended to do it. And that means you and those of us who end up testifying in court, I had to find a polite way of saying, yeah, my colleagues were engaging in a racially motivated activity. You don't say racist because it got to work. You say racially motivated. So you find a cute way of saying they knew what they were doing and they intended to do it. But the burden's on us to file a lawsuit.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you for letting me speak. I know you're trying to skip over me, but I wasn't going to let you do it anyway. But my name is Tara Taylor. I am the president of the University of Houston Downtown Black Student Alliance. And I'm going to be quick today because I know you're trying to get out of here. I have one very important thing to say. All of you, if your brother or sister got into a fight, what would you do? You would jump in, right? These people are out here fighting for you and me. And they're getting beat up. So I'm asking you today, if you don't know who to vote for, where to vote, when to vote, I need you to get with somebody, ask a question, ask it on Facebook. If you're under the age of 18, you need to get registered. If you're over 18, you need to get registered. If you have a college ID and that's all you have, you need to get to DPS to get a voting ID. So I'm here today to make a call to action to my community. This is not a joke anymore. You guys need to wake up. You need to pay attention. And I'm glad that I started that Facebook event to get some of y'all here because I didn't know about it if I hadn't been listening to my brother Damian Thaddeus on KTSU. So, and that's another issue, but I just want to say thank you for holding this event. And once again, you guys, if you don't know the answer, ask somebody. And Ms. Brock, please get with me because UHD wants to go to Washington. We're not playing around either. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And the last question will be this young man right here. Yes, sir.
I was wondering, what could a young black adolescent like myself possibly do or partake in to influence the elimination of the stand your ground law?
young. And I think most of what we are trying to do here will have a greater impact on you than probably anybody in this room. Everything that we've talked about will have a greater impact on you than it will on anybody else in this room. I think that for what you can do in terms of this effort is I think you can help us help you understand how we can get more of the people in your category involved. I mean, because some of us, while we relate to you, we have a difficult time trying to get your friends and your colleagues and your cohorts activated to move it. And yet, most of us understand one thing. Almost every movement that took place in this whole world that changed the nation started with students. It started with students. Students became the focal point for almost every change that took place in every government throughout this whole world. And so I think the answer lies in you. And I think while you're asking us the question, I hope you'll get involved, and I hope you'll understand and know who your state representative is. I hope I'm your state representative, because I'd love to have you come and share with me so that we can begin to have forums like this related to people your age. Because it would help. I have a book that I haven't published, and I put it together. It's called Street Law. And it's all designed to help youngsters like you understand the law, particularly as it relates to you. And I'll just give you one example. One of the first questions I ask, you're standing, and you're not supposed to do this, but you're standing in the park, the police drive up, and you have a marijuana cigarette in your hand. What do you do with it? Do you throw it down, you put it in your mouth, or you put it in your pocket? Well, you put it in your pocket, since you asked. First of all, you shouldn't have marijuana, but secondly, if you do, you should put it in your pocket, because the law says you have a greater right, an expectation of a right to privacy with it in your pocket. If you put it in your mouth, the police officer has a right to ask you, what is that you have in your mouth? If you throw it on the ground, there's something called the plain view doctrine that gives him an opportunity to come over and inspect it and take a look at it. So these are the kind of things. But I hope that helps you begin to help us help you get more of the people your age and of your persuasion involved.
Let me ask Charles Savage with the Fifth Ward Enrichment Center also to respond.
Great way.
Come on, young friend. Charles Savage with the Fifth Ward Enrichment Center. Why don't you respond to the young brother as well?
Yeah, thank you. Let me say, in the meanwhile, while we're waiting for those laws to be repealed, that we as a community need to start investing resources and time and money in the engagement of all our youth, especially our males of color, our young boys, in the kinds of nonviolent conflict resolution skills. These are the same skills that we should be using every day in our workplace, when we talk to one another, at home, in church, and it's not being done. And I'm not talking about pacifism. I'm not endorsing being a coward. I'm not talking about being a punk, as they said in the streets, which gets many of our boys killed from the get-go. I'm talking about constructive conversation that gives them the kinds of skills so we're confronted by law enforcement. We're confronted by someone who is angry with them, or they're angry with another person. But there's dialect and there are discipline type skills that we can teach our young people to be sure that even when they're confronted by a fool like Zimmerman, who winds up killing a young man of color with a gun, we don't send our kids into fist fights with somebody having a gun, that they realize what they're up against, and they can back out with dignity and with pride and with some common sense, and then live to fight another day to repeal the kind of laws that are on the books. So we need to start engaging our youth in these kinds of conversations and skills, formally and informally, and after school, at church, in the school, and in any place we can. And while we're mentoring to them, this is an ongoing, daily class.
Okay, and let me ask Gary, if you would chime in on that as well. Gary Thorne, former FBI agent, who's now retired as an author.
Good evening, and again, to add on to what Charles Savage was saying, first of all, Charles and I go back to 7th grade, so we've been around one another a long time, so we think the same thoughts. But we have a program with the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement called the Law and You. And in that program, we take our young boys and young girls, because oftentimes, and I can tell you as a law enforcement officer, dealing with some of our young women can be more dangerous, more hazardous than dealing with some of the young men. But we teach them when law enforcement approach them, you're not supposed to, you're better off responding not in a cowardly way. Don't show fear. At the same time, don't show over-aggression, because over-aggression can get you the wrong results. But instead, try to find a happy median, respond with respect. That's no more than responding in a sane way when an adult asks you a question, when you're in school, when you're in your place of employment. If you respond with respect, oftentimes you come back to fight another day. There may, in many cases, be law enforcement officers, for whatever reason, that may not treat that young man in the respectful manner that he thinks he should be treated. But at the same time, if that young man responds with aggression, if that young man responds with some type of outwardly fear, the bad result oftentimes comes out. That young man, we teach them in this program to respond with respect. And that's whether that law enforcement officer is male or female. And I can tell you stories from incidents I've been involved with that our young women in many cases are more aggressive and oftentimes than many of our young men. This is not typical to Houston. I've seen it in many cases all over the world. We're losing our young men, we're losing our young women. And what we need to do is, as adults, as parents, work with our young people because they are our future. And we need that very bad. And again, our program is called The Law and You. We're going to be working with the youngsters at 5th Ward in Richmond next week. And if you have time, I hope you come out and give us a hand.
Let me thank you. We have covered a great deal tonight, okay? And we could go on and on and on. But at some point, we're just going to have to pick it up and come to part 2. Let me thank, on behalf of the Caucus, let me thank all of you and those that have been in the overflow for coming out and joining us this evening for this discussion. And I invite you to continue to communicate with us as we reach out to communicate with you all as well. Let me thank all the members of the Black Press. Let me thank you all. Let me thank y'all for airing it. Let me thank y'all for writing about it. Let me thank y'all for being a part of it. Let me thank the members of the Caucus. Let me also indicate that the Caucus, along with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, is joining with New Life, Bishop Hilliard. There's a card on the outside on August the 9th and August the 10th. There's a, what they call the 2013 Young Overcomers United Summit, which is going to be focusing on kids from ages 13 to 25. 13 to 25 at New Life. It's a 2-day conference, totally free, where people will be invited speakers coming in from across the country, focusing on empowering our young folk from the age of 13 to 25. That's the focus. On August the 9th, August the 10th, you can pick up one of these cards on the outside, okay? So again, let me thank all of you. Appreciate it. Do not forget to vote, okay? Don't forget to vote.
If anybody hasn't signed the petition,
And all the elected officials, you're invited to join with us at Representative Miles' place. All elected officials, you're invited to join with us. Let me thank TSU. Let me thank TSU for the house. Will all the elected officials come to the front? All the elected officials come to the front. All the elected officials come to the front. All the elected officials, okay? Will all the elected officials come to the front? Please don't leave. All the elected officials come to the front.
elected officials up front right quick, please, right quick. Y'all ready to talk to Janetta Burns, you can come around. You can come around. So you're not in charge of this court. You need to come all around. Elected officials come down to the front, please. Representative Allen. Representative Allen. Representative